Alien mother wept at a tiny grave, unaware her child was alive, and a human had brought them back. Some places don't bury the dead. They cradle them, hold them like seeds in wet soil, waiting for the right moment to breathe again. The wetlands of Norellis, 3 didn't forget. Mist rolled low across the ground like a slow tide, laced with memory. Travis moved through it quietly, alone as always, boots sinking into sponge-soft sediment. His cartography pack bounced against his shoulder with each step, but the weight didn't bother him. Silence weighed more. He stopped by the collapsed bluff near the southern floodplain. Pressure from the last storm, 14 days ago, had ruptured part of the ridge, and a faint, localized ping had registered in the colony grid that morning. Probably just a rebounding sensor or wildlife cluster. But when he swept his handheld scanner across the slope, it blinked red. Organic. Faint. Buried. Travis blinked, adjusted frequency. Still there. Heartbeat. Weak. Child-sized. His body responded before his thoughts did. He dropped to his knees, pulled the vibrospade from his belt, and began to dig. The soil was slick and heavy. Vines tangled through every layer. It took 30 minutes to expose the edge of a Myellery emergency pod, fractured, compressed, but intact enough for air retention. The manual override hissed when he cracked the hatch open. Inside, she looked like part of the earth. A child curled under degraded thermal weave, blue skin stained with mud, long red hair matted and wrapped around her shoulders like a fallen ribbon. Her tiny hands clutched a bioluminescent bracelet pulsing faintly on her wrist. She didn't stir. Her lips were cracked, skin cold, but her pulse was there. Barely. Travis exhaled once. Gently, he reached in. When he touched her arm, she twitched violently, but didn't wake. The bracelet pulsed once brighter. A soft sound escaped her lips. No words, just air. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're safe." He wrapped her in his jacket and lifted her. She weighed almost nothing. Her limbs dangled, boneless with weakness, but her fingers reflexively curled into his collar. She didn't speak, but she didn't let go. The clinic lights buzzed softly overhead. Urgent care, Myellery juvenile, found in Bluff Pod. Low vitals, unresponsive, Travis said as he stepped in. His voice was calm, but his grip on the girl was iron. The nurse took one look and paled. Where did you find her?" "Southern slope. Collapsed pod." He laid the girl on the scanning table. Still breathing. The nurse activated the reader. A soft tone, then a hard beep. Her hand stopped. The scanner froze mid-process. She frowned, tried again. Then again. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be right." "What?" Travis asked. "She's registered as deceased. Official log. 15 days ago." He blinked. "That's impossible. It says she was buried." The nurse stared at the glowing ID. "Her name is Lyra. She was 5 cycles. Her mother, Velra, filed the death report herself. But the child's alive." Travis stepped forward. "Look at her." The bracelet pulsed again, slow but steady. The nurse exhaled shakily. "It must be a biological fail-safe. The bracelet only sends vital data unless it detects severe trauma. Maybe she entered silent sleep." Travis's brow furrowed. "What is that?" "A Myellery instinct. It's like a defensive coma. Some children can drop their metabolism to near zero in sudden environmental trauma. We've only recorded it in theory. They stop eating. Breathing slows. Even their biolights go dim. How long can they stay like that?" The nurse looked at him. "A week. Maybe 2. 15 days is at the edge." She swallowed, looked at the child again. If she were human, she'd be dead. Velra came to the grave every second day. Ritual was the only thing left that didn't slip from her hands. The braid was gone, the warmth, the voice. But this, kneeling in a mist, placing her palms on damp soil, reciting the names of ancestors as her people had done for centuries, this gave shape to the formless ache inside her. She walked slowly that day, as she always did. Her long red hair was still bound in the morning coil, woven with resin thorns and ash stalks. The thin cloak wrapped around her shoulders had frayed at the edges, soaked with days of silent storms. She whispered the child's name once. Then again, softer. Lyra. No wind. No reply. Only the mist, pressing close. She knelt before the spiral, sun-bleached grass braided into the symbol for child return to sky. Around it, carved memory stones formed a sacred circle. She laid her hands flat on the ground. I should have held you tighter. Should have, her voice cracked. She bowed her head and let her breath tremble into the soil. Suddenly, something shifted. Footsteps. Behind her. She didn't turn. Her body had no strength left for false hope. Then, a sound. A whimper. Small. Unmistakable. Her spine locked. Every muscle in her body froze like stone. Her heart lurched. No, no, this was a trick of grief. Her mind sabotaging her again. Slowly, so slowly she turned and saw him. Travis stood just beyond the carved circle. His clothes were soaked through, shoulders rising with each breath. And in his arms, curled into the crook of his chest, was a small shape. The hair was red. The skin was blue. Velra didn't move. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her breath hitched and caught and failed. Her knees buckled, but she caught herself on trembling hands. The world blurred, not from a mist, but from the sudden, violent shaking in her limbs. Travis said nothing. He stepped forward and lowered the child so her face emerged from the folds of the thermal wrap. Velra blinked hard, eyes flicking to the girl's cheekbones, to the thin line of bioluminescence barely glowing beneath the skin. Ellyra, the word came out stammered. Shattered. The child stirred. Her small hand reached outward. Velra flinched. No, no, this couldn't be. This couldn't. She crawled forward, not walked, crawled, as if the earth itself might vanish if she moved too quickly. She reached halfway, froze. Tears filled her eyes. She touched her own braid, still knotted with mourning thorns. I buried you, she whispered, voice shaking. I found your braid. They told me. Her hands hovered inches from the child. I sang your name into the soil. I cut my skin. I'll let the spirits take you. Then the little hand touched her cheek. And everything broke. Velra crumpled. A raw, broken sound escaped her throat. Not a scream, not a sob. Something ancestral. Something sacred. She pulled the child to her chest and began to rock. Not gently, but fiercely. Like holding her was the only thing keeping the world stitched together. Her fingers trembled as they unwound the mourning braid. She tore the resin thorns free, letting them fall to the ground. One caught her palm and blood beaded instantly, but she didn't flinch. She pressed her face into the child's hair. Her shoulders shook. Her voice cracked. Rain falls, S-star sleeps, shell closes, the S-seed keeps. Bone light, G guide us. KYW will F find us. Lyra hummed softly, matching the final notes. Velra let out a shuddered gasp. She touched every part of her daughter's face, checking for signs of breath, for warmth, for proof. I don't believe this, she whispered. I'm afraid to blink. Afraid you'll vanish again. She's real, Travis said quietly. Alive. Velra looked at him, eyes wide and burning. Why, she asked. Why now? Why you? I don't know, he said honestly, but she wasn't ready to be gone. And neither were you. Velra cradled Lyra tighter, forehead to forehead. The blood from her palm smeared against the child's braid, but she didn't clean it. That mark was sacred now. Behind them, the mist began to lift, not vanish, but thin enough to see light break through the clouds. Velra whispered one last thing, not to Travis, not to the spirits, but to her daughter's skin. You were under the earth, but you rooted yourself into me. And she wept openly, not from grief, not from guilt, but from awe, and the joy so massive it hurt to carry. Velra didn't sleep that first night. She sat in the corner of the clinic room on the padded bench, legs drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her eyes never left the narrow cot where Lyra lay, swaddled in vapor-diffusing linens, the glow of her bracelet pulsing in a soft, steady rhythm. Lyra's breathing was shallow, but even. Her skin, once cold and dulled to a bluish gray, had begun to recover its warmth, the faint bioluminescent lines in her cheekbones flickering in and out like lost signals finding their rhythm again. Velra couldn't bring herself to move, couldn't risk blinking. She stared as if afraid her daughter might dissolve back into air and missed if she dared look away. Her back ached, her shoulders were locked in place, and her hands, bandaged from tearing out her mourning braid, rested uselessly on her lap. Travis sat just outside the room, leaning against the wall in the hallway. He hadn't spoken much since the grave. He didn't need to. Every time Velra shifted, she could feel him there, his presence quiet, constant, like the weight of a mountain keeping the world from falling apart. The clinic lights dimmed automatically at the night cycle's midpoint. Velra didn't move. When the vapor curtain shifted slightly in the artificial breeze, a tiny hum reached her ears. A note, then another, half-formed, uncertain, but familiar. It was the tune Velra had sung to Lyra as a newborn, during nest phase, when the child had been barely more than breath and skin and instinct. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Tears welled up and spilled over, silent and hot. For the first time since the bluff collapsed, she let herself cry. Not from grief, but from something scarier. Hope. She sat there until morning broke against the clinic walls like pale fire. Travis returned mid-morning with 2 thermal flasks, one for him, one he placed silently beside Velra. She didn't reach for it. Her eyes were fixed on Lyra, who had begun to twitch softly in her sleep, like her limbs were remembering what motion felt like. "She's metabolizing again," said the doctor, a broad-shouldered woman with tired eyes and a voice like smooth gravel. "The vitals have stabilized. Still no speech, but that's not unusual. Silent sleep can suppress neural patterns, but the body remembers." Velra nodded without speaking. The doctor adjusted a setting on the child's hydration port, then glanced toward Travis. "You found her," she said. "You carried her out?" Travis gave a short nod. Scanner pinged faint bio signs under the bluff. "Something told me not to ignore it." "Something," the doctor echoed. "That something saved her life." Velra spoke then, voice hoarse. "She shouldn't have survived." The doctor paused. "I'm not sure she did. Not fully." She went under in full response. "Hypometabolic state. We've only ever seen it in theory." Her heartbeat dropped to 1 every 40 seconds. No intake. No output. She turned to Velra. "But her bracelet was intact. You linked it, didn't you? Before the storm?" Velra nodded slowly. "The bone-light bond was still there," the doctor said. "We think that's what saved her. Not physically, but spiritually maybe." Velra's throat tightened. "I let her go. You held her long enough for her to hold herself." Travis stepped in just enough to lean against the doorway. "That bracelet. What does it mean in your culture?" Velra looked at him. For a moment, it seemed she wouldn't answer. Then she lifted her hand and tapped her own wrist. "In my Ellery tradition," she said, "we don't bind children to promises or laws. We bind them to memory." The bracelet carries pulse code patterns from the mother, breath rhythm, voice print, biolight sequence. It tells the child, "You are known, even in darkness." Travis exhaled slowly. "That's why she held it so tight." Velra nodded. "She didn't hold it. She held me." Later that day, Lyra woke. Not fully, but enough. Her eyelids fluttered. Her head turned slightly. She blinked slowly, as if vision had returned in fragmented layers. Velra rose to her knees beside the bed, breath caught in her throat. "Lyra," she said gently, "can you see me?" The child didn't speak, but her gaze found her mother's face and stayed. Then her fingers moved, reaching up, brushing the air between them before landing gently on Velra's hand. Velra broke. Her body folded forward. She kissed Lyra's fingers, her forehead, her hair, again and again. She whispered words in Ellery, old phrases soaked in reverence and gratitude. When she looked up, Travis was still standing in the doorway. "She knows you too," Velra said. Travis's voice was quiet. "She looked at me like she was waiting." "She was," Velra replied. "We both were." That night, Velra stayed in the clinic room again. But she slept this time on a fold-out cot, hand resting on her daughter's blanket. Her breathing was slow and even. The grief had not left her. It wouldn't. But something else had taken root beside it. Trust. In the dark, Lyra stirred. She reached out and found the little bark carving Travis had left on her side table. A sunbird, carved in the old river style, Myellery, not human. It floated on water. Lyra turned it in her hand, then held it against her chest. She didn't say a word, but the bracelet on her wrist glowed just a little brighter. And outside the room, Travis sat awake, watching the rain slide down the window glass like time melting sideways. The signal in his pocket chirped once. He took it out. Another ping. Weak, distant, still buried. He frowned, not in fear, but in quiet resolve. There were more voices under the mud, and he wasn't done listening. Velra had not spoken of that day. Not fully. Not aloud. She'd answer questions with nods and short, clinical responses. She'd endured the grief assessments the colony medics required. She'd filed the death record herself, submitted the burial code, placed the carved memory stones by hand. But she had never told anyone what it had actually felt like to lose her daughter in the storm. Not the silence, not the mud, not the way the earth seemed to turn against her body like it was tired of letting Myellery mothers grieve. Until now, Lyra was resting again, curled on the clinic bed like a curled leaf against the wind. The vapor linens shimmered faintly over her legs, and her bracelet, recalibrated, cleaned, still pulsing, glowed faintly at her wrist. Travis sat near the window, organizing a field kit by lamplight. He wasn't looking at her. He never pressed. That was why she could finally speak. He was wrong, she said, voice rough. Travis looked up slowly, saying nothing. The colony responder, the one who logged her death. Velra's gaze was locked on her own hands. He said the shelter was compromised, that no one could have survived that collapse. She swallowed hard. He told me it was better not to go see it myself. She exhaled sharply through her nose. I went anyway. Her voice became distant, like someone watching the memory through fog. The rain was heavier that morning than the night of the storm. The roots had already begun to rot. The bluff was sagging in places I didn't recognize. I didn't care. I ran through 3 zones, past curfew, didn't stop when the enforcement beacon tagged me. Her knuckles tightened. I kept calling her name. I don't even know if I was saying it by the end. I think I was just making sound. The room faded from her view. The clinic bed, the field kit, even Lyra's steady breathing vanished from her focus. She was back there. It had started as a whistle in the bones, the way pressure always did. A drop so sudden her skin glowed with confusion. That was how Myellery knew. The light turned inwards. She and Lyra were gathering root bulbs along the flooded reed line. She had seen her daughter look up at the sky, heard the shift in her humming, and she had known. She told Lyra to run, to the bluff shelter. Lyra had hesitated, looking back, wanting to help gather their things. Velra had shouted. The moment her daughter disappeared from view, Velra turned to secure the toolkit. 2 seconds. That was all. Then the sky cracked. The slope behind her groaned, a sound she had never heard before. It wasn't thunder. It was something deeper, like the planet itself was shivering. She spun around and sprinted back. But the bluff was gone, collapsed, devoured. There was no opening, no signal, no sounds. The top layer had folded over itself, slick with runoff and crawling roots. She screamed. No one answered. She dug, with her hands first. Then with half a spade, she scavenged from a broken cart. She tore her palms open. Her knees bled from the sharp sediment. But she kept going until her arms no longer obeyed her. Hours passed. The rescue crew didn't arrive until morning. She found the braid herself, red, slick with mud and caught on a twisted hatch hinge, torn through the knot she'd made herself 2 days before. She'd washed it. She remembered that clearly. In silence. She'd used rainwater. She remembered trying to brush it smooth, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. That was what she buried. I remember holding it, Velra whispered, staring at her lap. Like it could still hum. Like it could still warm. Travis had stopped sorting his gear. Did you believe she was truly gone? Velra looked at him. Her eyes glistened, but there was no softness in her voice. I did, she said, not because the evidence was final, but because I couldn't bear to believe otherwise and be wrong again. Silence filled the space between them. It wasn't uncomfortable. Do you remember, she asked suddenly, what I said to you at the grave? You called her your little star, he said. Velra nodded. She used to say the rain knew her name, that it followed her around because it liked her songs. She turned to the window. Outside, a slow drizzle had begun, streaking down the panels like threads of silver. I thought the rain mourned her, she said, but maybe it was carrying her back. Travis leaned forward slightly. Can I ask something? Velra tilted her head, inviting the question. When you saw me carrying her, why didn't you run? Or scream? Why did you just kneel? Velra's smile was faint. Sad but real. Because nothing that miraculous should be met with noise. She looked down at her daughter. And because I was afraid if I reached for her too quickly, I'd wake up. Travis said nothing more. But when Velra stood and walked across the room, her steps were lighter than they'd been in days. She brushed a strand of red hair from Lyra's face, then turned toward the window. Her voice was softer now. She doesn't remember the mud or the noise. She only remembers light. She remembers the bracelet, Travis said. Velra glanced over. She remembers you. And for the first time since the burial, Velra allowed herself to smile. Not the empty smile of courtesy or resignation, but one shaped by grief and stitched back together by awe. Travis reached into his side pouch and pulled out a second scanner. He tapped the interface once. A faint signal flickered to life. Velra stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Another? He nodded, buried deeper. Same frequency structure, but this one isn't moving. She took a deep breath. Then let's not waste time. As they walked into the hallway, rain ticking gently against the glass behind them, Lyra stirred in her sleep. She smiled. It had been 4 days since Lyra woke fully. 4 days since her voice returned, not as a sentence, not even a word, but a fragile murmur in the night, here, as though she were telling the world she'd found her place again. Since then, her words had come in trickles. A color, a question, a short melody sung through crumbs of bread. Velra never left her side. But that morning, she stepped outside. She found Travis by the equipment bay, inspecting a pack of terrain scouting gear with his usual quiet focus. A second weak bio signal had been detected. Low resonance, no movement. He was planning another sweep. I'll go with you, she said. Travis glanced at her, reading the truth behind her voice. You sure? He asked. No, she admitted, but I'm going anyway. They didn't speak again until they were in the field, moving under gray light through the soaked brush where the marsh met the broken ridgeline. Lyra had been left in the care of the clinic matron, who understood that sometimes even mothers needed to leave grief behind in stages. The ground was soft, the mist low. Every step squelched underfoot. You never told me, Velra said suddenly. What brought you here? Norellis. Travis adjusted his belt. Same as most people. Lost something. Thought I could bury it here. But I found it follows you, even underground. She smiled faintly. That's a Maellery belief. That grief soaks into the land. That's why we bury with bone light. It's not for the dead. It's to warn the ground. They paused beside a collapsed vine cluster. Travis scanned the soil. The reading remained faint. I had a family, he said after a moment. Wife. Daughter. 3 years old. We were stationed on the Western Ridge settlement during the first terraquake cycle. I was working terrain analysis. Thought I saw a stability fault. I logged it, then rescinded it when the colony AI said it was a false read. He crouched, running his fingers through the layered silt. It wasn't false. The ground dropped 2 days later. Their habitat cracked open. Velra didn't answer. I stopped trusting AI data after that, he said. Started mapping by hand again. Hired out to solo mapping teams. Mostly places no one else wanted. That's why you were out alone when you found her, she said quietly. He nodded. Velra knelt beside him, gently pried a coil of root from the mud. And that's why you didn't leave. Travis looked at her. You thought if you stayed long enough, someone else's child wouldn't die like yours did. He didn't deny it. And you? He asked. Velra hesitated, then lifted her eyes to the ruined bluff. I was a political attaché on Maellery's capital moon. A speaker. We used to believe words could keep peace from fracturing. Her fingers shook slightly as she wiped dirt from her palms. I left after the orbital fire. My partner, Lyra's father, was burned when his shuttle was shot down. We weren't soldiers, just workers. But in war, proximity becomes target. Travis looked at her. And Lyra? She was born in the silence after that, Velrus said. No nation, no name. We got rerouted here with the labor refugees. They registered us under reassignment numbers. No home lineage, just workers. And yet you still taught her songs. Velrus smiled without joy. Even in silence, you pass down sound. The scanner beeped once, sharper now. Travis swept the handheld again. There. They worked in silence, clearing the muck from a fractured segment of what looked like a second emergency pod. But there was no hatch, no heat signature, just a crushed panel and a strip of bio-wiring pulsing faintly. Velra touched it with one gloved hand. Dead, she said softly. But recent. Travis exhaled. We're not too late. We're just the second story. They sat back in the wet soil, side by side. After a long silence, Velra spoke again. She used to ask me why the other children didn't glow like her, she said. Why her skin changed colors when the air was heavy. I told her it was because her body remembered things the machines had forgotten. Travis watched the mist roll between the trees. That sounds like truth to me. Velra looked down at her wrist. Her own bone light had faded over the years. Grief dulled it, but in that moment, it flickered again. Not bright, but enough. They stood. The ridge above them was still unstable, layers of sediment shifting under pressure. Travis handed her a hand light. She took it without speaking. On the way back, the rain came in steady now, no longer in sheets, but soft, even drops that tapped gently across their shoulders like fingers. When they reached the path that overlooked the settlement, Velra stopped. She was humming again this morning, she said. Travis turned. What did she hum? The old tunnel song. From the low halls. She's never been there, but somehow she remembered. She looked at him. Sometimes survival is not about escape. It's about remembering what waits when you come back. They walked the rest of the way without speaking. In the clinic, Lyra was awake when they returned. She looked at both of them, and for the first time, reached toward Travis. He froze, then stepped forward. Her hand, small and unsure, touched his. Skin to skin. Velra watched them, something rising in her throat she didn't name. Lyra looked up at her mother and whispered, He's not heavy, Mama. He's like the sunbird. He knows how to float. Velra knelt and pulled her daughter close. Over her shoulder, she met Travis's gaze and nodded. He stayed. The rain returned not with violence, but with intent. It had been steady all day, falling like a second skin over the colony, seeping into cracks, threading through supply crates and sensor panels, soaking the canvas shelters set outside the med bay. Travis knew that kind of rain, low, deliberate, and dangerous. It wasn't just falling. It was building toward something. He watched from the outer deck of the clinic as the ground began to sink in places where the water pooled too long. Not a full collapse, not yet. But he could feel it, like breath before a scream. Inside, Velra sat on the edge of Lyra's cot, brushing the girl's hair back into its newly woven braid. The child was humming again, faint and rhythmic, a tune Travis didn't know but found himself listening for. A soft buzz echoed across his belt. He glanced down at his scanner. Water levels were rising faster than expected. He stepped into the doorway. We need to move her. Velra looked up. How far? Clinic's low ground. If the floodplain breaches the ridge wall, this place is gone. Velra stood immediately. No hesitation. She bundled Lyra in a thermal wrap, her hands steady despite the thunder building outside. Where? She asked. There's a relay tower outpost up bluff. Elevated. Reinforced. She nodded. We'll make it. Travis hesitated. You sure she's strong enough? Velra gave him a look he didn't know how to read, somewhere between a blade and a vow. She's carried worse than water. They moved quickly. The wind picked up as they crossed the ridge edge, rain stinging skin and seeping into gear seams. Travis carried most of the supplies, leaving Velra free to cradle Lyra against her chest. The girl was awake but quiet, eyes wide, absorbing every shadow. The outpost was 3 clicks up slope, normally a simple walk. Tonight, it felt like a negotiation with the storm. By the time they reached the tower, their boots were soaked, clothes dripping. The access door's magnetic lock fought the wet, but finally clicked open. Inside, it was dark, cold, but safe. Velra laid Lyra gently on the elevated bench. Travis triggered the power array. Low lights buzzed on, flickering like tired fireflies. Lyra stirred, blinked up at the ceiling. "Mama," she whispered. "The rain's louder up here." Velra kissed her forehead. "It only sounds louder when you're dry." Travis knelt beside the backup generator, checking for leaks. Velra busied herself unpacking the emergency rations, dehydrated root cake, filtered water, a heat blanket. Outside, thunder cracked, sharp and clean. Then silence. The storm paused. Velra looked at Travis. That wasn't a break. That's pressure reset. The second wave's coming. Travis exhaled. "Then we stay put." A small shiver ran through him. His shirt clung cold against his skin. He grabbed a thermal blanket from the pack, wrapped Lyra first, then reached for the second one. But it was missing. Velra had only packed one. He shrugged off the tremble in his arms. "I'll keep moving. It's fine." But Velra stood, eyes narrowing. She unfastened the edges of Lyra's wrap, tugged open the side. "Lie down." He blinked. "What?" "You're cold. If you go into shock, she'll have to watch it. We can't let her watch that." He hesitated. Velra's voice softened. "I won't sleep either way. Just lie down." He did, carefully, slowly, not touching her, until she shifted, pressed her back gently against his chest, pulled the blanket over both of them. Her hair smelled of moss and air warmed by light. Her body, still damp, carried the heat of someone who'd stayed moving for too long. Travis didn't move, didn't speak, and then he felt it. A hand. Small. Warm. Lyra. She reached between them and rested her fingers on his chest, not asking for attention, just marking his presence. "Mama," she murmured sleepily. "When two people share a blanket, does that mean they're home friends now?" Velra's voice, low and tired, answered without hesitation. "Maybe it means they're not strangers anymore." Lyra hummed contentedly. Travis closed his eyes, not to sleep, but because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid to. Outside, the storm returned. But inside, something had shifted. Not broken, not healed, just softened, like a wall learning it didn't have to hold forever. The morning after the flood, the colony smelled like metal and rot. Drainage systems had failed overnight. Mud caked the pathways. The central generator had shorted twice, and Lyra's name still didn't exist in the official medical registry. Velra stood just inside the clinic vestibule, arms crossed, watching water drip from the edges of the awning like fingers tapping out a warning. Behind her, Lyra played quietly with a sunbird carving near the cot. She traced its wooden wings with the same soft reverence Velra once reserved for ancestor stones. Travis sat beside her, checking the power levels on his portable comm scanner. Every few seconds, he glanced at the door. Not to leave, to wait. Velra turned toward him. "We're not staying here." It wasn't a question. Travis looked up and nodded. "I know. They won't protect her. Not when the next disaster comes. They didn't protect her before. They won't even admit she lived," Travis said, setting the scanner down. "But there's a way out. North Plateau. Corin Reach Colony." Velra narrowed her eyes. "Corin Reach? That's 3 days on foot." "2," he corrected, "if the weather holds." She arched a brow. "It never holds." He shrugged. "We walk fast." There was a beat of silence. Lyra looked up from the carving. "Are we going somewhere?" she asked. Velra kneeled beside her. "Somewhere better." Lyra tilted her head. "With stars." Travis smiled. "If we walk far enough." They left at first light. The trail north was narrow and half-wild, winding through collapsed terra stabilizer towers and moss-swallowed sensor buoys. Fog thickened as the morning deepened. Lyra rode half the time on Velra's back, half on Travis's shoulders, giggling whenever he stumbled in deep mud and calling him Skylegs. The air shifted by noon. The mist warmed. By dusk, they had climbed high enough to leave the worst of the wet behind them. They camped on a slope beneath the remains of a fractured wind vane. Travis secured a tarp across 2 trees. Velra started a thermal core to heat the air pocket beneath it. They shared a meal of nutrient bark and wild root stew boiled over a portable coil. Lyra curled up in the middle between them. As night deepened, Velra watched Travis quietly from across the flames. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows, forearms streaked with scratches and old ink. He'd taken his boots off, letting the heat warm his socks. But his shoulders were still tense, always ready to move. "You don't stop," she said. Travis looked up. "Stop what?" "Scanning. Checking angles. Calculating wind shifts. You're still mapping. Hard habit to break." She paused. "Even in sleep?" Travis shrugged. "Especially in sleep." Velra pulled her knees to her chest. "And yet you stay." He met her eyes. "What else is there?" The fire crackled between them. Lyra stirred. Her voice came soft, dream-tangled. "Mama, if we find a better home, will it have birds that don't leave?" Velra blinked slowly, then leaned down to brush her daughter's hair. "If not," she whispered, "we'll stay long enough to teach them how." Lyra sighed contentedly and drifted back to sleep. Travis stared at the flames. "You never asked what you mean to me," Velra said suddenly. He didn't move. "Maybe because I never said. Maybe because neither of us could afford to name things when they weren't safe." She looked at her hands. "But now I keep waiting for you to leave. And you don't. And it's starting to feel like the waiting hurts more than the silence." Travis inhaled sharply. "You want me to leave?" Velra looked up. Her voice shook, but not from fear. "I want to know if you'll stay, even when it's no longer dangerous to." Travis crossed the small space between them in 2 steps. He didn't touch her, just knelt. Then, carefully, he took her hand. "I didn't stay because she needed me," he said. "I stayed because I saw someone carry loss like a blade and still manage to be soft when her daughter hummed. I stayed because I don't want to walk away from the only map that's led me home." Velra closed her eyes, let the silence stretch until it felt like breathing. Then she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. Neither of them spoke. There was no need. Lyra, half awake, cracked one eye open. "Are you hugging without arms?" she mumbled. Velra chuckled softly. "Yes, starling." Lyra yawned. "Okay, just checking." She fell asleep again instantly. That night, the cold didn't bother them. And for once, the future didn't feel so far. The second day on the trail began with clear skies and a hush so complete it felt borrowed, like even the planet was holding its breath. They broke camp early, wrapping the thermal blanket tight around Lyra's shoulders as she rubbed sleep from her eyes. Her braid had loosened in the night, strands of red falling over her face like flickers of flame. She blinked up at Travis, then Velra, and grinned. Did the stars watch us sleep? Velra kissed the top of her head. They never look away. They moved through the high marshlands, where the water was clearer and the reeds stood as tall as Lyra herself. Each hour brought them closer to Corin Reach. Travis had calibrated their route using an old human military beacon, now mostly overgrown but still functional. They passed an abandoned comms tower just before noon, its metal limbs twisted into the sky like fossilized ribs. Lyra tapped the base as they walked by. "Old bones," she said, almost to herself. Travis raised an eyebrow. "She means the structure," Velra said. "The Maillery called dead tech memory bones. We teach children to feel history through shape, not function." "I like that," Travis murmured. By mid-afternoon, the clouds thickened. Velra noticed first. Her skin pricked in response, the faint glow along her collarbone dimming slightly. "Pressure's shifting," she said. Travis adjusted the scanner. "Storm coming. Close." They pushed ahead. The trail narrowed, and the brush thickened. When the first drops hit, they were heavy and loud, more like knocks than rain. They found shelter in the husk of an old survey station, half swallowed by the hillside. The roof held, just barely, but the interior was dry and defensible. Travis secured the door with a salvage bar. Velra lit the low-heat lantern. Lyra sat cross-legged on a patch of insulation, hands tucked beneath her arms. Then thunder cracked overhead, the kind that comes not in a roar, but a punch. The sound made her jump. Travis knelt beside her. It's just sound, Starlight. She looked up. Big sound. He offered his hand. She took it without hesitation. Velra returned from the back of the station, carrying a strip of dried root bread and a flask of warm water. Eat slowly, she said, handing it to Lyra. We'll be out of here before the next sky turn. Then came the second thunderclap and a metallic creak. Travis turned sharply. The roof seam over the left wall had buckled. Water streamed down a conduit and struck his shoulder. He tried to push it aside, slipped on the slick floor, and went down hard, catching his knee against the bench. He swore under his breath. Velra rushed to him. You're bleeding. Not deep, he said, wincing, but not nothing. She didn't answer. She dropped to her knees beside him, dug out a med wrap from her kit, and rolled his pant leg up. The gash was red and pulsing, already leaking into his boot. You keep pretending you're made of stone, she muttered. I don't have time to be soft. Velra cleaned the wound in silence, her hands steady. When she began wrapping the gauze, she paused, her breath caught in her throat. The skin of his thigh bore an old scar, curved like a crescent, and just below it, faded ink. A child drawing, stick figures, two large, one small, drawn in jagged, earnest lines. Travis stilled. You saw it. Velra didn't look up. I think I always knew. She tied off the bandage, then sat back against the wall, exhaling slowly. You carry everything, don't you? Travis leaned his head back, looking up at the cracked ceiling. Only the things I can't bear to leave behind. Velra reached for his hand. Then share the weight. Their fingers intertwined, awkwardly at first, then with the ease of truth. She leaned in. The kiss was quiet. No breathless prelude, no trembling pause. Just warmth meeting warmth. A decision made without ceremony. A line crossed not for passion, but because there was no fear left in either of them. When they pulled back, Velra smiled faintly. You're not what I expected from a man who maps the world. And you're not what I expected from someone who lost everything. Lyra, curled in the corner with her blanket pulled up to her chin, squinted at them. Did you fall again, Skyman? Travis laughed. Only into your mother. Lyra blinked. That's high. You'll need strong boots. Velra bit back a grin, brushing Lyra's forehead. He has them, little star. And I have him. The rain lessened by dawn. They packed their things and practiced silence. But something had changed. Not just the closeness. The rhythm. The way their movements naturally folded into one another. The way Lyra drifted between them like breath. When they crested the final hill that afternoon, the view took them all by surprise. Corin Reach sprawled across the northern ridge, clean, terrace structures built into the plateau, solar sails blooming like petals in the wind. Children's voices echoed faintly from the edge. And the air, clear, dry, full of birdsong. Velra froze. Lyra gasped. It's real. Travis rested his hand on Velra's back. She didn't flinch. For once, they didn't rush the descent. They walked it together. Lyra picked a flower from the ridge brush and tucked it behind her ear. Then she looked up at them, her voice solemn. Can we stay long enough for the birds to know us? Velra looked down at her daughter, then at Travis. Yes, she said. We'll stay until they sing your name. And with that, they crossed the last stretch of path. Not as refugees, not even as survivors, but as something new. The morning light in Corin Reach was different, cleaner, drier, golden in a way that seemed to settle directly into the bones. Velra stood at the edge of the upper garden terrace, eyes half closed as the wind carried the scent of sun-warmed stone and blooming trail root. Behind her, solar petals rotated slowly atop the colony's rooftops, drinking in light without rush or hunger. It had been one full rotation since they arrived. Not long, but long enough. Travis had gone down to the registry dome to finalize their placement request. There had been no resistance. No questions about Lyra's records. No demands for scanned proof of survival. Here, identity was something rebuilt, not extracted. Lyra's name had already been etched onto the new census sheet that morning. Fresh ink. No asterisk. No disclaimers. Just Lyra. Child of Velra. Velra turned slightly. On the far end of the terrace, Lyra was playing with two other children, one human boy, one Mylery girl. They were building something from bark strips, and discarded irrigation tubing, laughing and yelling in multiple languages. Lyra's voice didn't hesitate anymore. Her braid bounced as she ran, face flushed blue-pink from exertion. She turned mid-game and waved. "Mama, look! We made a glider that doesn't fall." Velra smiled. "Only if the wind is kind." Lyra grinned back. "Then I'll sing it sweet." She darted off again. Velra breathed out slowly, grounding herself in the quiet. Her hand drifted to her own wrist, now marked by a freshly woven bracelet. 2 strands, one brown, one blue. Lyra's work. A gift. The door behind her slid open with a soft hiss. She didn't turn, but she felt him, Travis, long before he stepped beside her. "Permanent residency approved," he said. "Plot 3C. South Slope. Good sun. Quiet soil." Velra nodded. "Good roots, then." He smiled, his voice easy. "They asked if I had a family designation." She looked at him now. "And what did you say?" "I said I was spoken for." "And they didn't ask by who?" Her mouth curved slightly. "I like this place." Travis leaned on the rail next to her. "They offer me mapping work. Long-term. Hand charting the riverbeds for expansion." "You took it." "I told them I need time. Not because I doubt the work, because I finally get to choose what I say yes to." Velra nodded. They stood like that a while. Not touching, not needing to. Silence here wasn't distance. It was presence made whole. "Will she remember this?" Travis asked, eyes drifting to the children's game. Velra watched Lyra duck beneath a clothesline strung with solar-woven sheets. Her laughter rang out like a dropped bell. "She already is," Velra said. "Every breath, every choice." They spent the morning gathering new fabric for blankets, a heat coil for a cooking basin, and a long spool of bio-twine for Lyra to weave with. Travis picked up a set of garden markers and didn't say why. That evening, as the sun softened into copper and the wind dropped low, the 3 of them sat together on the hill behind the garden row. Lyra lay across both their laps, arms outstretched like wings. "When the stars come," she whispered, "can we still stay here?" Velra kissed her brow. "Even more so." Travis smoothed a strand of hair from Lyra's cheek. "Stars are just a roof, little one. They don't need us to leave. Only to look." Lyra sat up, serious suddenly. "Then we should build something the stars can see." Velra tilted her head. "Like what?" Lyra smiled, reached in her pocket, and pulled out a single memory stone from the grave she had once been buried beneath. "We'll put it here, so they know where I came back." They built a circle that night. Not a grave this time, not a marker of loss, just a ring of warmth, made from braided vines and firestones, with a single memory piece at the center. Travis etched one line into the stone. Not buried, rooted. And beneath it, in careful, uneven strokes, Lyra added her name. The wind passed softly overhead, rustling leaves but not disturbing the stones. And as night fell, the 3 of them stayed, arms linked, skin warm from the day, and listened to a sky that no longer demanded movement. They had arrived. They were not alone, and they were no longer surviving. They were home. Morning came softly to core and reach, the way it always did in early spring. Honey-warm light curling through the window slats, breeze threading in with the smell of turned soil, and sweet-grain porridge simmering somewhere nearby. Travis stood in the garden with a hand on his lower back, adjusting a row of seed markers. The sun hadn't yet crested the eastern ridge, but the slope behind their home already glowed amber. Behind him, footsteps padded down the garden path, bare feet, quick, deliberate. Lyra. She was taller now. 7 almost. Her red hair had grown longer, woven into a loose braid that brushed the top of her spine. Her bone light was brighter in the mornings, like the sky remembered her now, and not the other way around. She crouched beside him without saying anything for a while. Travis passed her the last seed pouch. "Want to place them?" She nodded. "You made the lines crooked again." "I like crooked," he said. "Means it's real." She grinned, but didn't argue. Together, they pushed the seeds into place. The earth was soft, still damp from the night's dew. Travis shifted to stand, then paused when he felt something, a tiny hand steady against his arm. Not gripping, just resting. Lyra looked up at him and said, very plainly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, "Dad, you missed one." She pointed to a bare patch just past the last row. Travis froze, not because of the word, not because it startled him, but because of how completely unremarkable it was. She had never asked if it was okay to call him that. Never said it for the first time with hesitation. One day, some weeks ago, it had simply appeared, woven into her language like it had always been there. She had said it in the same breath as "pass the plate" or "I found a worm." He had waited for it to feel surreal, waited for it to break him, but it didn't. It grounded him. Now, she was already moving on, hands in the soil again. He crouched beside her, pressed a kiss to the crown of her head. "Thanks, little one. I would have missed it without you." Lyra shrugged. "That's why you have me." A voice called from a porch. "Lyra, breakfast's ready, and you promised to carry the tray this time." Velra. She stood framed in morning light, one hand on her belly, round and full now, movement visible beneath her skin. She wore a soft tunic draped over her hips, her long red hair unbound for once, flowing like river grass. The bone light along her arms glowed gently, always brighter when she was near water or family. Lyra jumped up, brushing dirt from her knees. Coming, she ran to Velra, wrapping her arms around her mother's side, careful but firm. Velra laughed and ran a hand over her daughter's braid. "Did he plant them crooked again?" she asked. Lyra nodded. "Like a snake path." Velra looked at Travis. "Snakes are sacred in my Ellery soil mythos, you know." Travis raised his hands. "Exactly as planned, then." She smiled, eyes soft. "Everything you do is." They shared a look. The kind that wasn't searching for meaning. The kind that already knew. Later, they sat on the porch steps, plates warm in their laps, Lyra curled across both their knees, dozing in the early light. Travis traced the curve of Velra's belly with one hand. She didn't flinch. She leaned into it. "And he'll call you Dad," Velra murmured, her eyes half closed. Travis didn't respond right away. He just watched Lyra breathe. "I won't need her to," he said. "Not if she calls me by the way she reaches for my hand." Velra turned her face to him. "She'll do both." And he believed her. As the morning stretched long and lazy, Lyra stirred once and whispered, half in sleep, half in certainty, "Dad, the stars are watching again." And Travis answered softly, "They never stopped." The end.